so we have reached the time for our Q&A block. So I'm going to ask all of our presenters today, whether you are live or recorded, go ahead and pop your camera back on. Keep yourself muted unless you're answering a question and speaking, just to avoid some background noise for us. But again, I just want to express my gratitude to everyone who both helped us set up this event, sponsor this event, and provide information. Today was absolutely outstanding. I know I learned a lot, so thank you, everyone. Okay, I am going to kind of do my best to get through some of the questions we have. I want to thank those presenters that have been answering in the Q&A box, typing things in. And Molly, if you could just add Kevin to our panelist list, that would be appreciated so we can get him up here. Chuck, I think this first one might be for you, but anybody feel free. Oh, there's Kevin. Great. I'm going to kind of group a couple of questions here. So there are a number of questions about how EDDMapS works with other systems. And ISM Track, the USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species Database, the USGS Bison, the Western Governors Association Data Campaign, which we talked about in December at our monthly webinar, iNaturalist, you talked about a bunch, and obviously WildSpotter. Those were all the different systems that were put kind of into the chat and questions. How does EDDMapS work with these other systems? And subsequently, if somebody enters data into one of them, is it viewable across them all? Or do folks need to be reporting to all these different systems? Maybe Chuck, you could start us off on that one.
Yeah, so there are multiple different systems, multiple different ways to do data. Anything that is a project that we run is all going into the same database. So if it's WildSpotter, if it's ISM Track, if it's I've Got One, if it's Maiden, if it's Glendon, all of those are all part of Ag Pest Monitor, all part of the EDDMapS database. So that's part one. The Western Governors Association data mobilization campaign suggests that you submit data to one of the four major systems. And those four major systems are EDDMapS, IMAP Invasives, USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species Database, and USGS Biodiversity Information Serving Our Nation, or Bison. The USGS NAS system is focused on aquatics. And so we do have a very good relationship sharing data back and forth with them. We've also worked with IMAP Invasives on sharing data from their system and back to our system. We have a good relationship with USGS Bison as well. Their system includes some data that we don't want as part of EDDMapS because of the scope of that project. And they also don't have pictures as part of their system. And they don't have a way for individuals to submit data. So there's these slight differences between the different systems, but we've all made the commitment that we're working together, and each of us kind of provides different tools for different needs.
I'll kick it on the ag side. That collaboration's continuing out. I mentioned MyFields. We also work with FarmDog, working with Measure.io. In my usual slide deck, because there's a lot of different folks working in ag trying to track pests, I honestly don't care what system you use. They all built some wonderful tools. Are they willing to share data? The answer is yes, we have no problem. And leave it to the geeks in the background to figure out how to make sure we don't end up with duplicate data, make sure we carry record identifiers, all that fun geek stuff that we just have a great time. We handle that. And those conversations are going on and trying to make it better and better every year.
And I also say, somebody said, recommend reporting to one invasive species platform, what would it be? So it would be EDDMapS, obviously. But for some audiences, that's where WildSpotter and some of the other systems play in. So I didn't want to ignore that part. And somebody asked about GBIF and being partners with GBIF. GBIF and Bison is the US mirror of GBIF. And so once the connection between EDDMapS and Bison is completely there, then all the data from EDDMapS will be part of GBIF as well.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a couple of questions about privacy. and how to protect data from states' requests to review files, from Freedom of Information Act, from state regulatory agencies that might use it to enforce. Can you download the records with geoprivacy enabled to protect private landowners? There's quite a few questions in there about the privacy issue as it relates to enforcement. So can anybody speak to that a little bit?
I can talk briefly about location privacy, and then Chuck or Joe can get into things like FOIA. So as Rachel and some of the other people who've talked so far have mentioned, there is a field on the apps on the website called private or hide exact location. This allows a reporter to say, okay, well, maybe for my own purposes, I want this exact location known, but if this record should become public, it should only be at the county level. So we have worked with groups in the past that maybe they also did work on endangered species, and they don't want those locations known because someone could come in and poach orchids or carnivorous plants, or there's, sensitive wildlife nearby that can't abide humans. So we do have that private coordinate feature available. Now, a verifier in the review process can also make a record private. So if the verifier notices this is on private land or it's in a sensitive area that they don't necessarily want people to be in, the verifier also has that opportunity to make a record private. And when I'm saying publicly available, I mean shows up on our maps, shows up in queries, shows up in data downloads. The only people who see those coordinates are the person who reported it. If you're part of some of those projects Joe was talking about, where you're part of like a group of people all working together, and in the review process, the verifier sees it. And that's for that reason. The reason we have that is because if you're reporting hydrilla or something aquatic, but the point shows up in a agricultural field, that's a problem. That gives you cause for like, okay, let me look into this a little bit further. And again, they only see it in that review process. When they go to download records, it's not going to be in the downloads. It's not going to show up on their own maps, anything like that. But as far as some of the like whole record things, Chuck and Joe can get into, FOIA and things like that.
And I'll add, there's also one other place on a individual's profile. They can mark that they wish to be anonymous. Publicly, if someone were to look at the record, it would say something like Corn Disease Working Group participant. The people in the project know who it is, but publicly it doesn't say Farmer Bob, because everyone knows where Farmer Bob lives and he doesn't need that kind of advertising. So one other area of protection.
And I guess the last thing I'll say, so EDDMapS is a ongoing research project, which provides some coverage in terms of FOIA type requests, because you don't publish on something until the project's over. So that helps. But at the same time, if data is not meant to be shared with a regulatory agency in the state or area, then it doesn't need to be submitted to EDDMapS in terms of, in most cases. And Joe, you can correct me on part of that, but in most cases, the verifier network is tied to those regulatory agencies. And so one of the questions was along those lines. And I think that needs to be clear that in a lot of cases, we're working with the regulatory agencies to make sure, especially for something that would be a regulated pest, that they're aware of it. And so, where I don't want to say don't report something, but I think the understanding when you report something is going to those verifiers. And in a lot of cases, those verifiers are in those regulatory agencies.
From a pragmatic standpoint, I'd like to know the example of you. I understand someone being concerned about regulatory action being taken against them because of a report. I'm going to, for a second, say that perhaps some of the regulators have a good head on their shoulders in some cases, and they're trying to manage something that could be a much larger issue. So at some point, a discussion needs to be had about certain things and where they are. Regulators are a fact of life. You're not going to get away from them. And if you say, well, I'm not going to report it, and you just leave the issue to develop somewhere, I don't see that ending well for the environment that you're trying to protect. So there needs to be a civil discussion about the situation. And as Chuck said, if you're really trying to hide it from anybody, then uploading it into any system would probably be a bad idea.
We are looking at some ways to map things at a finer, for records to not show up as in, we've been very intentional of not putting centroids on counties for level reports that are only at the county level. So, but we also recognize that some of your counties in the Western United States, or I think somebody mentioned Hawaii, are as big as Rhode Island or bigger. And so we need a way to show that finer resolution without it just being at the county level. So we've got some grid maps and some other maps that we're working on to be able to visualize something without it being at that level. Oh, and we did have there's like 5 quick poll questions that we would like everybody to answer. I know, we're getting to the end and we're going to start losing people, but yes, I think those are propped up. So if you would fill those out, that will be great as we're figuring out best ways to move forward with this. And we're going to have more of those tomorrow as well.
Okay, so those poll questions have popped up. So go ahead while we're just chatting and doing Q&A. Go ahead and answer those questions for us. Thank you so much. Okay, I think that this was already covered, but I just want to make sure everybody is clear since we've talked about a number of apps today related to EDDMapS. So for our friends in Florida, do you want them using I've Got One or EDDMapS, or does it not matter? What should folks in Florida use to put their data in?
Yeah, so it really does not matter. And it doesn't even really matter with Glendon, Maiden, those older apps as well. Those apps will ultimately be retired. And there will be 4 primary apps to report to EDDMapS. And that will be WildSpotter, I've Got One, that we're going to focus a little bit on the public and maybe expand more nationally or internationally. And then EDDMapS and EDDMapS Pro. Those are going to be at the 4 apps, the 4 main ways to get data from your smartphone into EDDMapS moving forward. But if you love EDDMapS West, you don't have to stop using EDDMapS West right now.
And then Rebecca, I think you had a slide comparing the two, but when should somebody use EDDMapS versus EDDMapS Pro? When do you upgrade to Pro? Yeah.
Okay, so this doesn't have I've Got One on it, but it has the 3 other apps Chuck was just talking about. And it kind of gives you an idea of who would be best suited to which app that we put out. And so it gives you an idea of, okay, if you really need a field guide, you probably shouldn't use EDDMapS Pro. If you're just a casual observer, or maybe even like a trained volunteer or citizen scientist, you probably shouldn't be using EDDMapS Pro because it's a little more complicated than most people need. But if you're some sort of land manager, you work as maybe an ecologist or a biologist or something where you're in your professional job, you're having to manage a particular area and you have a pretty good grasp of the species you're going to be reporting, that's when I'd start recommending EDDMapS Pro, especially if you're very interested in revisiting existing records, or if you're, especially again, Jerry mentioned earlier about verifiers having the ability to do in-app, in-field verifications. That's really important for a lot of people. So this is a document I created just for helping people out. And there's one other thing I created, which goes for EDDMapS and iNaturalist. So this is the whole EDDMapS concept and looking at, again, the whole iNaturalist kind of concept as well. And this was developed, and I use iNaturalist for reporting, I saw, a squirrel tree frog and I saw, a really cool bird. And so I do use iNaturalist for that, but this is a slide from a presentation I gave a couple of years ago. And it just kind of gives a really brief breakout of what the differences are. One of the big differences between EDDMapS and iNaturalist, in my opinion, is that iNaturalist does not take in data from anywhere else. All the data in iNaturalist came from people reporting in iNaturalist. So they don't have the U.S. Forest Service data or the National Park Service data or USGS aquatic data or anything else. Take any data, from us, from EDDMapS. Everything in their database is from their community. That's kind of a big thing that is a big difference. But this gives you, like I said, a general breakout of the differences between these two. And if you can only have one app on your phone and you're a casual observer and you want to report, the really cool spiders you're seeing as well, you can use iNaturalist, and it's likely that the records for invasive species will make their way to us eventually.
Okay. This question, maybe back for Rebecca or somebody else. How does EDDMapS vet the verifiers that QC your data? Do the verifiers undergo some sort of training so that they know all the aspects of data quality control according to EDDMapS standards? And can you just speak a little bit more about verification and using the triage system? So it's kind of a couple questions merged.
Yeah, I'll start, and if I forget something, Joe or Chuck can chime in, because there is an aspect where that I can't remember if Joe covered or not with the experts and things like that. Okay, he's shaking his head. So we have conversations with anyone who wants to be a verifier or anyone we reach out to try to include in our verification network. The most broad way to say it is we talk to people who have education, training, as well as they are often in some aspect in the field. So maybe they are working with SISMAs or CWMAs, maybe they work at state and federal agencies, county parks, whatever. But in some aspect, they have the experience and the training to identify these species. We do have a kind of quiz we put up or developed in the last year that is only for making sure that verifiers can navigate our system. It's not a test to see if they can identify certain species. It's just to make sure they can navigate our system and the capabilities it has. We are working on a certified verifier badge or icon that we want to put on our verifiers profiles, as well as kind of next to their names, the check mark you get or the badge you get on different social media for saying, yes, I'm a famous person. We are working on that. But for some of our states, we also have allowed people in those states to be admins to a degree. And so what they can do is they're a verifier admin. They can add as an administrator, they can add new verifiers. So if Jerry or Kevin wants to hop on to talk about how they do things at their local level, that would be a good idea.
Okay, in our local level, we've been working on this for many years now, and we've tried to get our weed supervisors in the state to be our verifiers. We have yearly trainings. We have universities come and do on-site trainings. Chuck's been to a few of them with us. We've done a lot of the EDDMapS training also to verify. If we can't get a county to participate, which most do, we've had some kind of an extension person that could do it for us. What else, Kevin?
I think that's pretty much everything. It's just, it takes a collaborative effort, it seems like, from the whole state to be able to accomplish this. And like Jerry said, we have everybody involved. And like I said, we just kind of train ourselves. And most of them are all the county weed supervisors that are aware and are able to either get it from a species and check it out, or a photo or something like that. And it makes it fairly simple and easy to run through those questions that we went through and answer them and be able to have it verified right back out to the users.
We've had some really good luck, and Chuck's shared a lot of our experiences with people over the last few years about finding infestations in our state that were never known before. So it's all about, I think, using this app for us is all about finding out what's next door to you. So it's been quite a good thing for us. Is that it, Chuck? you think?
Yeah, I mean, and just any other tips that y'all have for getting, I mean, getting, you know, the worst words in the English language are, if I could speak, are we've always done things this way. And so it's getting past that. And that takes time. And you're not going to get every county on board tomorrow. You're not going to get every state on board tomorrow. You're not going to get every federal agency on board tomorrow. But, you know, you have to look at this as, you know, we're trying to solve this problem. It's taken us almost 20 years to get to the point that we're at now. And we're going to be working on it for the next 20 plus years with different presenters for EDDMapS Summit 20. But we are going to continue to grow it and develop it, because some things like this just take a while to get everybody on board and everybody, you know, on the same plate, because, well, we've always done it this way. Why should we change?
Yes, find your value and then run with it.
Okay, thank you for that. For those county weed managers and other managers that are using the systems, do you prefer monthly uploads, annual bulk uploads? How often do you want to see their data if the answer is not, you know, live uploads?
So bulk data, I say whatever is most useful for your program, because we do have some people who have to do reports more than once a year, say quarterly reports. And so they need data in more often than once a year. But there are some programs that for them, it's easier to submit once a year. If you're going to be submitting, I mean, once a year is fine, just in terms of logistics, because I basically have to do the same thing each time. It's just the volume of data changes, which only increases the difficulty a little bit, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into formatting data for going from one database to another. So it's really what works best for your system and what your needs are.
Okay, thank you for that. We do have a few minutes left for Q&A, but just wanted to let everybody know that those results are up there and we appreciate you taking them. I know, Chuck, when you were talking about WildSpotter, I think you already mentioned this, but the question came in a couple of times about the National Park Service using WildSpotter. And if there was a park that was willing to jump in, what's the process for them to participate? Should they email you or Mike? Or?
I mean, it all depends on what level. And, you know, that's a great question, Elizabeth, because there's not a good answer for it. But there becomes a point where, you know, maybe you're not going to get every park on board, but there's no reason to push this out and make this available for all the parks if a good majority of the parks are not on board. And I think that sometimes it's more efficient to do things at a larger scale than it is to do things individually. So we kind of learned that as we were doing and as we were figuring out adding more forest, it finally came to the point that it was like, okay, let's just do it for all of them, because that makes more sense. It's more consistent. And that was one of the biggest questions we got were, when's my forest going to be added? And so that's where I hope that we can find some solutions, both at the state level and yes, we could expand into Canada as well, but for WildSpotter. But yeah, I think we need to look at the larger scale and ways that we can form these partnerships and everybody help support the program and then help grow the program as well. That helps. And we have been trying to answer some of the questions in the chat, and I think some of them will be answered tomorrow. But if you did not get your question answered, please reach out to us. bugwood@uga.edu is the email address that you can always get. And Rachel has to dig through those and figure out who they get sent to. So I can easily just name that, just like giving her cell phone number out. But reach out to us that way, and please join us tomorrow. We've got a great lineup, and I think you'll really learn a lot of more details about some of the great things folks are doing.
I do want to make one thing as clear as possible, because this was a question a couple different times. How much does it cost to use EDDMapS or EDDMapS Pro? To use the apps, to use the website, It's free. Anybody can sign up for an account. It's free to use. It's free to request the data. It's free to make queries. It's free to submit records. The only time anything really cost comes into the picture is if we start talking with different programs or groups about building new features or new tools. But just as an average person or a program that doesn't need anything more than we've already built, it's completely free to use.
I'll tag on to that. My other role in life is I'm one of the directors for the Southern IPM Center. And that IPM Center has a supplement to help with technology nationally. And we've told folks, if it's already been built and something in our suite of tools, you're welcome to use it. And we'll help give you training on that and get you off and running, including help on getting the things customized and put into your website. So we support a lot of that work for the corn, soybean, wheat, sugarcane aphid. All that work is being covered under a little bitty supplement from USDA NIFA. Thank you, USDA NIFA, for the regional coordination program. We have a lot of tools that are just freely available. And it's that extra development that Rebecca mentioned that, all right, this is going to take a programmer's time to get you something new and something you're going to like. That's where the cost comes in. And that's usually where we actually end up being a partner on grants. So it's not coming out of your pocket. I don't know of anyone probably in this audience who's sitting around with a giant pile of money next to their desk. If you do, give me a call. But, you know, we got to find ways to work together and make this happen.
Well, I think that is the perfect closing statement for us today. Oh, Jerry, did you have something you wanted to share?
Partnerships. We've had the Forest Services really been a big partner in this. I don't think it could have been done without them. I just wanted to say thanks to them also.